I'm spectrum, skeptical spectrum. It's the worst corny joke I've ever told. No, there's more. I've been worse. Today I'm going to talk about materialism, Buddhist emptiness, idealism, and essentialism. I'd like to write those down somewhere so I don't remember I'm going to talk about. So I remember I'm going to talk about all four. Um, let's start right away with materialism. Materialism is the idea that basically whatever we can observe as physical material or whatever we can start to really experiment with and infer what exists, what's behind what we see as matter. You know, for example, atoms are, I mentioned this in my last video, so huge that if you really drill down to some of the things that make reality as we see it, they're not really, they don't look physical, they don't feel physical, they don't sound physical, they don't taste physical, they don't smell physical. What I mean is particles are kind of apparently developed out of quantum fluctuations, things like that. You know what I mean? It's very mysterious, and we're going to be constantly learning more about it. I think it's perpetual. I don't think we'll ever drill down to what's real, whatever real means. Now, I also want to talk about essentialism, emptiness, and idealism. From my readings and my understanding and me watching of videos, is that essentialism is this idea that I have some essence inside of me that doesn't really change or mutate or die um, or weaken or strengthen or anything like that. It doesn't really change. Essentialism, I think, is the idea that basically kind of like I have a soul, like I cannot truly cease to be because I am changing the lighting here. I cannot truly cease to be because I have something within me that is not material, that lasts forever. Idealism, I'm going to say, is very, it's not quite similar. To me, there's Berkeley, and there is, I think, Plato, Platonic, maybe Aristotelian, but one of the Greeks. Their attitude of idealism is the concept that there is a realm of prototypes, basically, of sort of drawings, of sketches or whatever, but they are the real version of what physical objects are. So it's almost like they're a prototype or a template from which material things are created. And that is not something that died out with the Greeks. I've had arguments online about people who really believe that since we can't really, I'll talk about this later, but since we can't really perceive reality, it's possible that idealism is the only reality, meaning that this little space heater here has a template in some idealistic realm. There are a lot of thoughts and assertions around idealism. For example, what I just said, there's this realm of all these templates of everything that could possibly be created: a zebra, a human, the Venetian blinds behind me, the Venusian blinds behind me, and those wonderful people on the pictures over there, the cabinet, the closet behind the camera, and all that kind of stuff. That those are all only possible because there is a template in a non-physical realm that makes them creatable. There's a further development. I'm going to just go into idealism for a while here. There's a further development that in the ideal realm, because it has to take some sort of consciousness to have these ideas or ideals that are, real, that it takes some sort of consciousness to pay attention to them. That I think is Berkeley's development. I may be wrong about that. Aristotle or Plato may have believed the same thing. Um, Actually, I think Aristotle's and Plato's, or the Greek version, was similar to essentialism, where there is something deeper than the physical material, right? But I was going to say that I think that Berkeley went into the concept that it has to have somebody paying attention to the ideal, Somebody has to hold the ideal in their mind. So let's say there is a template of a hand, right? Since there are billions of people on the earth, it doesn't seem there's any danger in everybody forgetting about the idea of a hand, so we're safe. There are going to be hands for a very long time. Berkeley said, though, that we really don't have to worry because every possible ideal template for a material creation is being paid attention to by a God. And I don't agree because I'm not sure there is a God, but I get it. It's logical in a world where it seems that a God is a necessary source for all we see and hear and taste and smell and feel. Um, Back to essentialism, the concept there is also, I would say, not metaphysical, because that means a lot of things. It's about the invisible reality, but not in a way that can be inferred or confirmed by experimentation, hypothesis testing, and such things. Um, you see, there's a discipline in some methods for confirming or rejecting a belief you have. Scientific method is like that. The idea that about essentialism is that looking at me, looking at my behavior, looking at the fact that my body changes over time, there is something in me that says I'm the same person I've always been. And there's something in me that says, I recognize you. Like I have a best friend from fifth grade, probably my best friend. I have one other best friend that's a close equal, just in case he's listening. And I met him in a junior college. And to this day, he's a best friend. I think I probably have quite a few people that I consider a best friend, but these are the two that come to the forefront. Um, and I see them as familiar, right? And I'm 54 now. And I have very little reason to say they're the same person as before. Now, to me, because of the way my brain works, I recognize them physically. I see their faces and they haven't changed much. But that is something very cool about human beings. We can see the resemblance between me and my father and between me and my mother. We can see the resemblance between me 20 or 30 years ago, and we can see the resemblance, from that to me now, right? But we can also sometimes look at a friend that we haven't seen since high school graduation, and only 20 years have passed by, and you can't even look at them. You can't even recognize them for reasons like maybe they've had a hard life or they've really just grown into themselves or whatever. Their attitudes are different or whatever. But we nevertheless perceive that there's a continuing person them, within them that may not be physical. We might think it's the brain, but then we know that the brain can change, although there are limits to its changes, I think. But this is the essentialism is about really more of a non-corporeal, non-material essence inside you, right? So you have an essence, not like lemon essence where you can squeeze it out and you can turn it into a perfume. We're talking about like something ghosty and spooky, some essential what you are inside, right? Now, you're going to think that I'm going to move into Buddhist, not impermanence, Buddhist, Buddhist emptiness. And you're going to think that's spooky. But I actually think that Buddhist emptiness is a type of empiricism, which means looking at observables and making inferences and trying to be careful about what you think is true. So, Buddhist emptiness. Buddhist emptiness, I think, admits that it sees the changes and that nothing has an essence within it. And I would extrapolate from that nothing has an ideal template to create, say, the template of a human being. As you know, the template of a human being, or as you can infer, that the template of a human being does not imply that all the human beings look alike, that we have basic necessary characteristics to call us human. Now, you can already see that there's a flaw there because you don't have to have 2 arms and 2 legs to be a human. You don't have to have all the components to be a human. It's very hard to break down what you must have to be a human. I mean, you could say a human head, you have to have a human head, or you have to have a human brain, or something like that. But there's such a variation in brains. And, imagine someone coming out extremely, um, I'll say, genetically atypical or physically atypical, where they might be missing 3/4 of their brain. We would all basically say that's a human, and we would sort of feel pity for it or be interested in how it's going to do in life and that sort of a thing, and who's going to take care of it, right? Um, so, I mean, I think I'm making my point here that that there isn't a really. So I'm moving from essentialism. Well, no, I'm actually talking about essentialism here. That means that it's really hard to nail down a set of characteristics that means somebody meets the essential reasons for being a human. This actually has to do with like biological speciation too, meaning what are different species. It used to be, I think, that we had a rule that I mentioned probably this in my last video or the one prior to it, that if two things came together and couldn't breed, that automatically meant they were different species. Um, and what's happened to that is not a clear cut distinction. So that's what I think is going on with Buddhist um, emptiness, is that there's no reality in the distinctions we make. We're always kind of fumbling with creating differences between this hand and this hand. You know, where did we call this a hand, but there's no like real stoppage between my forearm and my hand. Now you might say, yes, there is because the bones are different. But yeah, that's an arbitrary choice because the vascular structure still kind of flows into my hand to create capillaries at the tips and on the skin surface and all that stuff. So there's just as much continuity between two things as there are distinctions. As I press my hands together here right now, I'm not trying to prove that if I press them together hard enough, they will become one. It's that right now they are interacting. My left hand can feel my right hand, and my right hand can feel my left hand. And why is that? Because there is signaling between them. And the signaling between them is not because it's not like necessarily an illusion. It's that there are sensory apparati and there are interpretations in the brain and there are like heat, touch, and all these things. And the fact that these two are already part of the same body, that we really should have a little trouble determining which hand is the left hand and which hand is the right hand. This turns into sometimes the concept of like sort of universal unity. But I'd be very careful about turning that into a very touchy feely thing. It's just it can be touchy-feely. I'm totally into emotions and that sort of thing, right? But not because I want us all to be at peace, which I do, but it's because it is, I think, a more accurate way of understanding everything, reality. One is to admit that you can't understand. We can't really, and I mentioned this, maybe I mentioned it in a previous video, but the air that separates this hand from this hand is also the air that connects this hand to this hand. There's a through line of particles of air between here. Not only that, there's magnetic radiation. There's the fact that if some radiation passes through this hand and makes it to this hand, it is changed by this hand before it makes it to this hand. So everything in a very physical, almost dry, kind of matter-of-fact way is connected. And it and I think in the Buddhiness, I love it, baby. The Buddhist emptiness idea is that we are also empty of distinctions. Everything is dependent, and this is a Buddhist term, dependent arisings. Fine. It kind of means that if I don't eat, I don't create more body and I don't exist. What do I eat? I eat meat, veggies, and other things. Where do those meat, veggies, and other things come from? They come from consuming and reprocessing and changing the form of whatever it was that they ingested. Like I think I may have mentioned in a video recently, the trees ingest radiation from the sun and maybe the cosmos in general. Maybe there are ways we ingest radiation that feed us. We also ingest radiation that can give us skin cancer too. But again, this is going to sound like I'm being silly. Skin cancer is a growth. There's no real, a priori, prior to human beings existing and experiencing ourselves is very important. There's no rule that says skin cancer is not as um, uh, um, legitimate and valid as human existence. I don't think that the world of reality in general prioritizes non-living, so-called non-living things like rocks over living things like bacteria. I don't think it prioritizes certain living things over others, like bacteria over humans. See how I skipped over this because I'm so prejudiced toward humans that I thought we're just way far away from being bacteria. So I think Buddhist emptiness, in my version of it, and maybe probably the modern sort of secular version of it, is though we have the capacity to have preference and unpreferred things and love and hated things, people we want to bring close to us and things we don't want to bring close to us and things we want to push away from us. I don't think nature is that, and therefore we're not really that. It's a way we function, a perspective we have because of the way reality sort of crafted us. So, what I want to encourage in you is doubt. Entertain the idea that you don't have an essence. I hate to say this, but that's not dissimilar to entertaining the idea that you don't have a non physical form, like maybe you don't have a soul. Idealism. Don't necessarily think that things exist because they are deeply real. A doorknob isn't necessarily deeply real. There's no realm, I don't think, because I don't think we have any evidence or experience of that, of a realm where the template and the idea of doorknobs exist, or that people exist, or that doggies exist, or that planets exist. We are barely scratching the surface based on the way we are able to observe things, of trying to determine whether there is a way to discover the actual reality. So you can tell that it means a lot of mystery around everything, around whether there is real physical reality, over whether there are really atoms, over whether there really are particles that make up atoms, although about over whether there is a distance between any two things, whether there is time, whether there are discrete events. I'm saying you cannot prove that there are to me those things. You can't prove to me that there are those things, and I can't prove to you that there are those things. We are really deeply progressing into certain types of observations that make it doubtful that we're deeply progressing into some kinds of major observations about what is real in the world. And I don't want to make this I don't want to say this in a way that makes you feel uncertain and giddy in an unpleasant way, and that nothing is real. That's not it at all. I'm just trying to say that I think a branch of Buddhism, or several branches of Buddhism, have this concept of emptiness, which is very pragmatic. Um, it encourages us to say, not to say, but to sort of be like scientists who try to take a chance and have an idea, find a way to test whether their idea is right or not proven to be right. I think that's the most honest way of living. Now, I hold out the hope that that sort of skepticism gives us freedom to be happy and to be less kind of worried, and to recognize that we've sort of got an illusion going on, but we can work to navigate the illusion, right? And it's not an illusion because reality isn't real. It's not an illusion in some sort of like you have to have an enlightened mind to understand it. This gives you the chance to choose points of view and explore them that that can unchain you from some of the habitual beliefs that may be responsible for the tough times, the tough feelings you have about the way things are working out in your life. If you have beliefs and they're being contradicted in a way that makes you feel like you're failing at certain aspects of life or expectations about life, you I think it's better for you to realize that you do not know that you're failing. You do not know that there's something wrong. You don't know that this event means that there was an injustice that invalidates your efforts on the planet. You can generally take this analysis to validate that you are connected in some way, whether real or illusory, you belong, you exist, but that there is something about your ability to doubt every little level of reality. No, that's not true. That's not actually true. The, the flip side to this is that you do perceive that people exist, that walls exist, and all that kind of stuff. And so the reason this might be true, what I'm talking about might be true, and that's why I'm talking about it. But the utility of it is that you can play sort of a seesaw or a balancing act of I can just sort of tell certain things are real. You can really, you have the experience of sensing yourself as real and other people as real, and of things as being good and things as being bad and things as being painful and things as being comforting. And you can understand that there's room to learn. That's hopeful. I think that can be comforting and soothing if you investigate this kind of thing further. Bye bye.